Today we are talking about the future of Afrikaners, but the real practical future of Afrikaners. And when you're talking about practical future, you have to talk about resources as well. I'm joined in the studio with Joost Strydom, the CEO of the Orania Movement. Joost, welcome.
Thank you, Frans. Great theme to discuss, since the future of Afrikaners is what we are busy with. And if we are not adequately prepared and not able to make something work here, one can ask oneself, what are we busy with? And I think that's what Orania want to do. We want to help give answers in regards to the long-term future of Afrikaners, and not be a short-term little estate, but a long-term solution, one of the long-term solutions.
But let's talk about that practically then, because Orania's strategy is very much to create the ground roots reality, something on the ground that nobody can deny, that everybody has to recognize there is a homeland or a growth point for Afrikaner freedom. But in practical terms, what does that mean? What is the real strategy on the ground? What is the real needs of the people of Orania to create that future?
Frans, I think any good strategy or any good plan would start with a good audit of what your current situation is. If we don't know what the situation is that you are in, it's very tough to get a solution to that situation. And thus comes something that I call, being in touch with reality, being in touch with your political reality. If you are not able to do an audit of your political situation, blatantly honest with yourself, and from that point devise solutions, then you are most probably busy wasting your time. And we see that I think in the political landscape around the world, you see so many movements just busy with noise, busy with things that maybe gathers a lot of emotion, gathers a lot of things like that. But it is in the long-term noise. What will be remembered in 100 years, in 150, and in 500 years? What will be remembered? If you look back, for example, at what some of the great empires, or if you look back at the Greeks, you don't know much about their day-to-day disputes, but you do know that there's some big things that happened. Or the Romans, they did this and this and this,
yeah.
Or whatever the case might be, the British Empire, whatever. So what's going to be the big things that we put on the ground for our future? And we must be careful for noise. So let's start with an audit. What is the situation that we find ourselves in?
Well, what is the situation? If you think about Afrikaners being around, let's say, 5 million people in the world, Afrikaners in South Africa being about between 2 and 3 million people in South Africa, that's a country with more than 60 million people. What is the actual situation, political situation for Afrikaners? And then, what do Afrikaners want? What can they expect, or what should they strive for?
Make an extremely important point just in your introduction, saying that, well, there's around about 5 million Afrikaners, and we have maybe 2.5 million of those here. So something happened that put the Afrikaner in diaspora, putting them around the world, with maybe around half of them in their mother country, in their fatherland. And why is that the case? I think that's kind of the first important points of an audit. How did it happen that we got scattered around the world? And to add to that, I think the second part of our audits should be, how did it happen that Afrikaners are spread so thinly? There's very few pieces in this big country. Africa is quite large. Why did it happen that Afrikaners are so spread around? There's very few points where they are concentrated in one spot. So that's two important points of the audit. The third is quite obvious, and I think that also is an indication of the situation that we find ourselves in, or maybe some of the roots of some of the issues. And that is, Afrikaners don't have a government. Afrikaners got an ANC government. Afrikaners got a New Zealand government and an Australian government and a United States government now with, I just saw the stats for I think last month, 1,060 something Afrikaners that left on the refugee program from the United States. And there they are under the American government, and some of them are under a British government. But there's nowhere on earth an Afrikaner government. So spread around the world, spread around the country, and stateless. We don't have an Afrikaner state.
So
that should be the core of any audit.
So being stateless, should that be the focus of the Afrikaner then? I'm thinking in practical terms once again. in a way, Orania is creating a de facto state for themselves, for Oranians themselves, well, here in Orania then.
I think Frans recently stated that the state's going to be a less and less of a role player in South Africa because the private sector is just going to, or other forms of collectivism is just going to take the vacuums that the failing state is leaving. And we must remember something about the ANC government. The ANC government is actually quite successful in some spots. It's they are, and with successful I mean able to project their power, right, or to predict. To shape the flow of funds. That happens in certain spaces. If you look at the metros and things like that, they are managing to have control there with the G20. They were able to block down streets and move VIPs around. They are able to project their power in certain spaces. However, South Africa is so tremendously huge and with so many different peoples that when you get to certain spaces in South Africa, you'll see a total vacuum of state influence there. Maybe the rural areas of KwaZulu-Natal or even here in the Northern Cape or other places where other machines are the ones that dictate the pace. That could be private estates, that could be traditional communities, that could be just lawlessness, it could be gangs and warlords, mini warlords is a good example, or the construction mafia or whatever, as good examples of entities that took control where the state is not in control. But don't make a mistake, there are definitely places where the ANC government is able to project their power. So in that metaphor, the whole idea of Orania creating a de facto reality on the ground here is just basically in sync with many other competing smaller entities, and people go where they are serviced the best. If it's the government, or it's maybe the DA, or maybe it's a private estate, or maybe it's a criminal warlord that tend to their needs better than anyone else, or a drug lord or whatever. And that is something fundamentally important to remember. Now, you used an important word. You said de facto. Orania is busy building the de facto realities for a stateless people.
Yeah. So that theme, that idea of what should be the role of the state, I want to bring it back to crowdfunding freedom, because that is the theme or the subject that I want to talk about today. I think that is something often missed by media and journalists visiting Orania, and maybe some of our viewers will see that as well. Many journalists, many social media influencers visit Orania, and this idea of creating your own de facto state or your own de facto rural municipality or local governance is seen as something completely bad, while completely missing the fact that Oranians, as citizens of South Africa, do pay their South African tax, but our local government receive nothing back from that. So in this idea of the role of the state and creating a de facto state, how does Orania sustain itself?
Frans, that's I think the core of the strategy then. So you made the comment that about that creation process. So on the one hand, one must say, how do you survive day to day? And I think you don't need the state to survive. I mean, if you're out there in the desert, but you've got water and you got shade, you don't need the state to provide it to you. You can survive. Someone drop you in the Sahara, you're on a deserted island. There's no state, but you got food, you got water, and you can survive. The state doesn't keep you alive second to second. In
contrast to having the right to water and not actually having that.
Yeah.
When you actually have water, you can survive.
So Afrikaners are experts. I think some of the best examples in the world of people that can provide tactically for themselves. We've showcased that during the war, many wars with the British, the two big wars and many smaller skirmishes, I want to say, as well as many of our other wars here in the continent, that we are tactically brilliant, and we can stay alive, we can think as individuals, independent thinkers and so on. But now we're in a situation where we must do both that, because not only is the state necessarily just incompetent, it's sometimes antagonistic as well. It sometimes actually targets Afrikaners. So on the one hand, you must survive farm murders and you must survive being economically excluded, but that couldn't be the core of your existence, and that surely isn't the core of Orania's existence. It's not to just survive another day, to just not get murdered. If your core principle, your core philosophy in life is not to die in a farm attack, you are busy with things of the temporary. Obviously, you must do everything in your power to assure physical safety and security, but in the long term, you must build something strategically. So one aspect of our survival, and I think that's what you referred to, is just day-to-day stuff. But how do we do the long-term stuff? And that is where the idea of crowdfunding freedom comes from. In a certain sense, how do we spend our resources? So I want to take an example. The reason why we chose this area on the map is because it is what some describe as a demographic hole. It is an empty part. It is so empty that if you project, say for example, the population of something like Bahrain or Singapore or Hong Kong on this area, you would be fascinated to see if you just go 30 kilometers to the north and 30 kilometers to the south around Orania, which is very, very short distance. It's not even getting to our neighboring towns.
Yeah.
If you just do that, you've got that radius of 30 kilometers around Orania. From north to south, a total of 60 kilometers. You would have an area bigger than Singapore, bigger than Hong Kong. In Singapore, there is a population of 5.45 million people, more than the total amount of Afrikaners. Am I saying every Afrikaner that exists will come live here and everyone must be forced to move here? Obviously not. But stability creates mobility. If you have a stable home base, it's almost like a child having a loving home, parental home. If you've got something like that, you've got the mobility to travel the world because you always got that kind of that I'm not going to say the word backup, but kind of that
fallback.
Stability. You've got stability. So even if the Orania area just becomes that, we'll be miles and miles further than we are now. And that is why we are investing the money that we receive. And I don't mean investing into bank accounts or technology companies. We invested in infrastructure. What kind of infrastructure? Well, the kind that would further that cause, the kind that would further independence. So if a person, for example, donates to Orania, through the Orania Movement, it could go to infrastructure projects, through the city building fund. That would include things like roads, that would include things like sewage maybe, or it would include maybe a focus on our runway to have air travel more accessible. If they donate maybe to the Help Saam Fonds, the Help Each Other Fund, loosely translated, that could be something that's used to invest in people. And specifically in smaller sized residential areas. So what you have is a small apartment. Frans, you know as well as I that Afrikaners are the type of people, if they are knocked off balance a bit economically, they just get that bit stability again. They will work again, they will work themselves up. If you can just give someone a small apartment where they can just find their feet again, if they're economically been excluded for a long time and things like that, they are the type of people, once they get a stable job, they are going to get their own piece of land. They're going to build their own house. They're going to make a plan. That's just the type of people they are. And that is the type of projects we are investing in.
So just to sum up, if people contribute to Orania, what you're actually saying is there's a lot of different institutions, there's a lot of different options, so that you know that your donation or your contribution actively supports in that way that you would like it to support. But then the other thing, I mean, speaking about crowdfunding freedom, that is essentially what is happening. I think next time when one of our viewers sees a documentary about Orania, there's this little thing that you should always keep in mind when our opponents are attacking Orania, is that not only is Orania building everything itself, everything in Orania, all the work that's being done here is done by Afrikaners themselves. And we can do a later episode on our own labor principle as well. But everything is funded either by ourselves or by people who contribute to our cause as well. In that sense, Orania is never taking anything from anyone, but it's actually creating wealth. It's creating something positive for the entire region around it. So there are many different ways to crowdfund freedom for Afrikaners here in South Africa, here in Orania, here in the Northern Cape. And I would invite our viewers to explore those different avenues. Joost, if there's anything else that I haven't touched on or anything else that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I do want to, I want to take an example. Something as small but quite unique as just building the Paul Kruger statue. So we're a stateless people. We're a people being displaced for many reasons. Not only, we've been excluded and there's racial laws and things, but we're also being systematically demographically just displaced from where we are. Our culture, we can't keep our culture alive in certain spaces because we are just becoming a smaller and smaller minority. And I think from all the stateless peoples around the world, and there are many examples, and you speak about the Kurds or many other. In Africa, there's also examples. In the Middle East and what. So you get stateless people, and they don't have a state to take control of them, but they keep their culture alive. The Paul Kruger statue is a good example of putting something down to say what we are busy with, whilst on the long term protecting our culture and also creating jobs. It's not like you just throw your money on the water. That money to erect that statue there paid the builders, paid the people building the city square around it, and on the end of the day, if you want to crowdfund freedom, you need to fund things that will on the long term systematically improve the conditions, create wealth, and create infrastructure for generation and generation to follow. And that, I think, is the key. And there is where Afrikaners, I think, have some lessons that we can share with other stateless peoples around the world.
And with that, I would like to thank the more than 5,000 members of the Orania Movement who already actively contributes. And I want to invite anybody watching to become a member as well. But more than that, to follow us here in Orania, follow these updates, see what we are doing, and see how that contributions is actually working towards freedom. Joost, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And to everyone supporting, thank you very much. We do appreciate it very much.